For the last 3 years of her life, the sole ambition of Natalie Avero was to design and construct the perfect staircase. By her early 20s, she had pursued and subsequently abandoned careers in painting, architecture, interior design, particle physics, photography, phenomenology, and investment finance. Her conclusion after all these had failed was that the creation of this staircase was the single ideal outlet for her intellectual faculties, as it were, her calling. This piece of utilitarian creativity, she reasoned, would take clever advantage of the technical experience she had hitherto acquired, and would, like a Mozart symphony, meticulously counterbalance each practical and aesthetic demand to the perfection of its form. Natalie kept a careful photographic record of her process. The first picture was taken just after she converted her dining area into a workshop, leaving only a television and an ancient movie poster to distract her from her labor. Where she ate, slept, and had casual sex with her landlord is not exactly known. She began her work like any responsible creator, by observing the work of her predecessors in the field. This research proved to Natalie a point that she later mused should have been obvious from the beginning, that a staircase is an integrated part of an architectural whole, and that only in airports do they stand free. She therefore concluded that her own staircase must be relatively small, or else risk its own utility. She determined that it would bring its user to a plane of elevation precisely 30 inches higher than that of their origin. The most ergonomic and aesthetic means to this goal was of course a matter of great preoccupation to Natalie. Is the efficiency or effortlessness of the climb a better ideal? Should one place the ornamentation on the vertical aspect of the steps or on the sides of the chassis? Is the aesthetic appeal of a short overhang worth the risk of tripping over it? Someone who has never built a staircase would never be aware of such quandaries, and indeed neither was Natalie until that moment. But another narrative found its way into Natalie's photographic journal. The landlord, who would stop by for the occasional fuck, did not share Natalie's talent for noticing details, and regularly left inadvertent calling cards in his wake. The affair, at first the innocent relationship between a single woman and an unscrupulously married man, became a way for Natalie to avoid paying rent. In exchange for waiving her board, Natalie's landlord received as services the prompt return of his abandoned miscellany, Natalie's silence to his family regarding the affair, and, of course, on-demand fellatio. With her newfound leverage, Natalie could work shorter hours at her day job and can devote more time than ever before to her project. With this freedom, she was able to move on from schematic drawings to three-dimensional models of the final product. The breakdown that took place 6 months before Natalie's death was precipitated by 3 related but separate factors. Whether out of guilt or boredom, the landlord had stopped visiting, and the long, miserable hours at the job she consequently acquired left Natalie exhausted and unable to work. She became disillusioned with the project that had hitherto been her passion, and after 3 unproductive weeks, she destroyed nearly all of her progress in a temper tantrum. Precisely one of Natalie's schematics survived the massacre. When she retrieved it from under the chair that had shielded it from her wrath, she superstitiously concluded that this sketch was the staircase that she had always meant to design. She set about building small models again, and within 2 weeks she had regained her momentum. At length, the landlord returned to continue the affair, and Natalie was once again relieved of her financial obligation to him. At the 3rd visit in the series, he left behind a pair of earrings originally intended to be an anniversary gift for his wife. This, Natalie thought, was a tremendous boon. A mistake this grave would surely buy 6 months of rent from the guilty party. She turned out to be entirely wrong. The landlord became immediately unavailable to his confused tenant the next morning. If she had been able to speak to him, she might have found out that, upon realizing his mistake, her landlord had a turn of conscience and had confessed everything to his wife, upon whose subsequent command Natalie was to be evicted. This was, of course, a flagrant violation of her contract, but Natalie was ignorant of this story. She rather assumed that this was the result of months of unpaid rent catching up with her. She was to die 1 week later without learning the truth behind her exile. This is the last photograph Natalie took of her workspace. Her upcoming eviction seems to have inspired her to work ever more industriously on the staircase. She removed all the debris from her workspace and had begun to work with models that resembled the staircase's actual size. It is possible that, had she lived 1 day longer, a pile of wood, nails, and the necessary equipment to join them would be sitting in the area vacated by the table's removal. The police took this photograph 2 days later. Natalie had fallen onto a container of her drafting pencils. One of the pencils ran through her temple and into her brain, killing her instantly. Her last sight on this earth was the pointed tip of the pencil that had seen her through so many long afternoons in previous years. And for 12 hours she remained in this pose, crucified, so to speak, over top of the cause that for 3 years had been her reason for living. Some suppose that this was a suicide, the world's shortest fall to the death. One cannot be sure of Natalie's thoughts during her last week of life, but it is almost certain that her death was unintentional. This embarrassing demise was most likely the result of her tripping on the lowest step of the model's staircase. It was comparable, someone observed, to dying by slipping on a banana peel. Natalie's friends and family received the news of her death with utmost shock and despair, and despite its starkly funny nature, they forbade anyone to laugh about it in their presence. Rather, they would reflect with sad irony that her life might not have been so short if she had persevered with one of the pursuits of her earlier life. Perhaps investment finance would not have been so lethal.